clear. Please, you have the floor, Paul.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And greetings. Greetings from California. So I assume many of you have actually seen news articles and maybe even presentations on quantum computers and such. This one is aimed specifically at you folks who are network operators. Hopefully it's useful. It will go through some of the basics of quantum computers and then post-quantum cryptography. But the idea here, and hopefully we have plenty of time to discuss this in the Q&A session, is what does this mean for network operators? So quantum computers are, quantum anything is very difficult to describe to folks, even folks who have degrees in physics. You'll find that physicists will laugh about, if you think you understand quantum computers or even just general quantum mechanics, you're probably wrong. So you've been hearing about more of this, and you've probably seen articles, but articles like these, even YouTube, presentations, rarely talk about the actual dangers for individuals. They talk in general about, gee, this could go wrong or this could go wrong. And I'll have a few slides on that. But I really want to focus the last few slides exactly on network operators. What's coming your way in the future and how to avoid, the bad parts. So presentations like this usually start off, here's a few problems that you might see, and here's how you solve them. And I want to be really clear up front that here's how you solve them will not necessarily be easy. It's not that it is so hard, but you are relying on other people, your vendors basically, to be doing the fixes for you. So keep that in mind as we do this. If you don't want to know any of this, that's fine. You can listen along, and the last few slides will tell you you're really at the mercy of your vendors. Sometimes that's fine. Certainly for some of the hardware issues that you have, that's fine. But do be aware you might have to pay some attention, but really you're not the one who's going to have to fix things. And yes, quantum this, AI that. Yeah, we're all hearing these things. And the basic takeaway is there is a lot of money being thrown at building quantum computers, but they're not being built for the reasons that we're talking about today. Some of it is, but in fact, what a lot of the money that's going to quantum computers is meant for is scientific research, possibly actual research that's related to quantum things, but in fact, it's about scientific research. However, some of it is going to build quantum computers that are going to be able to make attacks on the information that you folks as network operators are passing around all the time. They'll be able to look at secrets. They will be able to impersonate each other. Now, those computers, the money that's going to those are called cryptographically relevant quantum computers, or CRQCs. And yes, there are going to be a bunch of other acronyms in this. I tried to limit them, but in fact, it becomes so many syllables, the acronyms are actually reasonable. One of the things that people are talking about as they build these quantum computers is, yes, they'll be able to use for cryptography, but we're really building them for these other purposes. And one of the more interesting scientific purposes that they've talked about is being able to look at organic materials and tell how to make them better. And specifically things like fertilizers. How do you make a fertilizer better and such like that? But as people are building these quantum computers, they're not actually finding that those other problems are readily available. It's not like they can say, once we've built a quantum computer, it will solve this problem. They're hoping that they will, but they're not. So the main thing that I want to impress on you is the CRQCs are happening. They're going to come, but we can't predict when. And you'll see some predictions. Oh, it'll be 5 years. Oh, it'll be three. Now you'll see that people are now saying 3 years and such like that. I'll be honest with you, those predictions are, I guess the best thing I can say is people who have no track record in making good predictions are the ones making these predictions. They might be right. I'm not saying that they'll be wrong, but when you see an article that says, this important person says we will have cryptographically relevant quantum computers in 3 years, and that same article says, this important person says it'll be 10 years, both of those guesses are as good as each other. We don't have a good track record of figuring out how quantum computers will happen. So one of the things that, as people say, well, a quantum computer, that's just like a computer that uses quantum bits, or which are called qubits. That's not the case. A qubit takes completely different hardware than a normal bit. We think of computers as like these things that we carry around in our pockets. They've got a bunch of transistors in them and such. A quantum computer is completely different. The bits in them, the quantum bits, they use physics that's completely different. And one of the things that we are used to in the computers that we run, or your routers, or any of those computers you've surrounded yourself with, is that the bits work. It's a 1 or it's a 0, it'll work. In quantum computers, these bits are inherently noisy, meaning it might be a 1, might be a 0, might be some value in between. And in order to make them useful, you have to put them together, a large number of them together, to get an effective qubit. So some of the designs say, oh, in order to do this, you need 100 qubits to act like a real qubit. Some of them is like 1,000. And we currently, today in the middle of 2026, don't really know how these quantum computers that some people say are going to happen within 3 years. We don't know if that number is 100 or 1,000. So imagine you're trying to buy hardware and your vendor says, well, you might need 100 of these to do what you want, or you might need 1,000. Shall you buy? It's very, very difficult here. So one thing to keep in mind, though, is in order for these CRQCs to exist, they need at least, according to current estimates, 1,000 effective qubits. Now, looking at the bullet above, that means they need 100,000 qubits, or maybe 1,000,000 qubits. That's a huge difference. And it's only time will tell which of those numbers. But the very important thing here is that you need all of the effective qubits to be useful as a CRQC. So we're used to like things now where someone can say to you, you need a computer of this size to work. And you don't want to buy one of that size. You want to buy one that's half that size. And maybe you'll have to run it twice as long. That's not true for CRQCs. For a CRQC, you have to have the minimum number, which is approximately 1,000, maybe more, effective qubits, which means you might have to have 100,000 or 1,000,000 for it to really work. It's not that you can make a small one that runs slower and just run it longer. You have to have that minimum. So taking that in mind, we hear these predictions about CRQCs. And what we're hearing these days, especially from some companies that really care about this, companies like Google, who really are trying to protect their users' privacy and such like that, is that some government, and let's just use the word government here, it could mean a group of governments, a regional government. Usually it's the spies. I'm not sure how you in your various regions call the parts of your governments where it's just the spies. It's not the people who are helping so much. They might have one in as little as 5 years, because they are spending tens or hundreds of billions of US dollars to make these. They don't have them now, we're pretty sure. And it might be more than one government, of course. There are multiple governments who are trying to own one. And again, I want to be specific. It's really the spy agencies that care about this. Other parts of the government don't actually care about being able to break your cryptography. It's the spies who want to be able to look at the secrets or impersonate and such like that. So maybe as little as 5 years or 3 years, but as I said in the previous slide, you need this very large number of actual qubits. And we don't have computers with that now. Let's say we build them, and in fact, there are scaling problems. Putting together 100,000 qubits in one computer might be literally too hard to do at all. So this might never happen. I'm not saying it won't happen, because my ability to predict is just as bad as all of those other people who are giving you predictions. So don't listen to me any more than you listen to anybody else. But the outcome of this is, because this is really going to probably be spy agencies and such like that, we're not going to know when the first cryptographically relevant quantum computer is built. They want to keep that a secret. So these predictions are just our best guesses. So now let's talk about how, let's say one of these is built and it's being run by somebody who is not your friend. And that could be not your friend. It could be your own government not being your friend. It could be the government of a neighbor not being your friend. It could be the government of someone in a completely different region not being your friend. What kind of problems does this create for a network operator? So currently we're very used to doing things like with TLS and such like that, SSH, where those things keep our communications private. You set up a tunnel, a cryptographic tunnel, and it keeps it private. What a cryptographically relevant quantum computer can do is decrypt that. Let's say today you have sent a secret over a TLS tunnel. No one can see it other than the two ends. That's all great. You're making a bank transaction, for example. Somebody who captures that can decrypt it later once they own a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. That's a problem for network operators, because you do things like user keys for SSH. You do things like passwords in TLS. So not only is it your customers' data that they are used to keeping secret, but it is also things that are very relevant to you, secrets that you want to keep secret for 10 or 20 years, because you don't know when you're going to change your password next and such. So that's one of the two things that people are very worried about with CRQCs. The second aspect is that a CRQC can actually forge private keys. So once a CRQC is built, it can act as a man in the middle for things like SSH or TLS and such. We're used to now saying, okay, we know who both ends are. We have these trust structures, for TLS, RPKI, which is very important to many of the people in the room. We have a way of trusting the RPKI certificates. Once a cryptographically relevant quantum computer is built, someone can do impersonation like that. So these are the two main classes that network operators should be concerned with. And I want to emphasize the first bullet about secrets. Someone can take your traffic now, get a copy of it, which is useless to them today, but later be able to decrypt it. In the second bullet, the being able to impersonate, that is not relevant until the cryptographically relevant quantum computer is built. So the first one, store now, decrypt later, that's what most people are worried about. But the second one will also be a worry when these are built. It's not all bad news, I promise. If it was all bad news, you could, like I don't want to scare you all before lunch too much, but um, there are algorithms that are, right now we're using RSA for a lot of these things, or elliptic curve. We can change the algorithms that we are using now to what are called post-quantum cryptography, or PQC algorithms. Note that changing this does not fix store now, decrypt later, because anything secret that has gone by using the old algorithms, using RSA, using elliptic curve like we've been doing for the last 30 years, that is still decryptable later. But as soon as we switch algorithms into PQC algorithms, then the leakage stops. So the very good news is these PQC algorithms are, like people have been working on this hard for the last 10 years, actually some for 20 years. We've known that quantum computers might come literally since the mid 90s, that people realized, oh, this would be really bad for cryptography. People have been a lot more concerned about this in the last 10 years. So we do have algorithms that are known. One that you may have heard of, if you're good with acronyms, is MLChem. It is already widely in use in TLS and SSH today. You may be using it now without knowing. You would have to look, but that is an algorithm that is for the store now, decrypt later problem. MLDSA is a signature algorithm. It is becoming more popular. So these things are already known. And there are some other algorithms that are post-quantum algorithms that are coming along for signatures. But today you're starting to see usage of this. Now, one thing that's very relevant to network operators is how much data is being passed back and forth at the beginning of every TLS session. Right now, it's not very big. It's not a big deal. We don't tell people be careful. But the keys for these post-quantum algorithms are often larger. So an ML-Chem key is like 800 bytes instead of like 80. It's 10 times bigger. That won't necessarily break anyone's traffic budget, but it is worth noting, especially as network operators. The bigger problem is MLDSA keys for signatures. These are the ones that are used in certificates or in your SSH keys, or certainly in your RPKI. These keys, the signatures are larger. They're 1,300 bytes instead of 50 or 60. And the signatures themselves are even bigger, 2,420 bytes, or bigger depending on your security. That can actually gunk up the beginnings of every communication session. Again, not enough to break your budget, but probably enough to notice, for the same things that used to go quickly, these things are going more slowly, just because the keys and the signatures are larger. Okay, so we've got some problems. I gave you some solutions on this last slide. How do you guys do the transition? How do you make this transition? Really, what you're relying on is your vendors. Your vendors may understand this. They may not understand this. They just might blindly know that they need to be doing things, but they're the ones who are going to be putting it in to your applications, into your routers, into your switches and such like that. And they'll be doing it. Some of them have already started doing that. You may not even know. Some of them will be telling you, we're going to be adding these. One of the things that you have to keep in mind is if they silently add a new algorithm, you may need to make some configuration changes to actually use the algorithms, to not keep using the old ones. So that is a thing to keep in mind, and you need to keep in contact with your vendors about that. So for TLS and SSH, the things that are keeping our secrets going, this is not an issue for you. You don't have to be watching this because it might turn on automatically and the protocols hide the details from you. That's not always the case, though. Depending on who has made your firewall, who's made your router and such, you might need to change some of the configuration. Excuse me. The biggest issue is, are your vendors even doing this for you? Are you in the right tier of support with your vendors, especially for things that are specific to network operators, such as real size routers? You have a support contract for the router. Are you getting your updates? Are the updates including these post-quantum algorithms? Generally, that's going to be pretty easy for TLS and SH. I know you've been hearing at both this meeting and at previous meetings a lot about RPKI. This is going to be a big problem for RPKI. It makes the certificates much larger. It makes the certificates use a different algorithm, which means different people are going to sign in different ways and such like that. And so like right now, you don't get to negotiate, I want you to use this certificate. If you're using it, you're using it. If you're not, you're not. The same's true for TLS certificates. So you're going to probably, as you hear from your vendors, you're probably going to hear more about post-quantum cryptography for signatures. You're going to need to pay attention for this with RPKI. TLS has an interesting problem, which is currently, if we just slap in MLDSA, the signature algorithm that I mentioned in the previous slide, it's going to make starting up a TLS session take so many more bytes that some of them are going to fail. Just, if you demand that some would be able to handle this many bytes, you all are familiar with slightly flaky links. A slightly flaky link works a lot of the time, but not all the time. And then you don't get your TLS session set up. So the TLS folks are working on a new proposal to make the certificate exchange faster. That's going to be a radical change. So many of you are also folks who are setting up domain names. I'm sorry, setting up domains for your customers. And they say, oh, well, give me a TLS certificate. The way that they get those 3 or 4 years from now might be radically different than they are today. But I cannot tell you anything about that because that work has just started in the last 6 months. So given all that, what do you all need to do? And then we can go to Q&A. Certainly you and I want to know when the first CRQC is built. Like, I want to know, oh my God, I'm not ready, but there's one out there. This spy agency has one or something like that. Or this government built one for other perfectly good reasons. But now we know if they've got one for perfectly good reasons, the spy agencies, in fact, could try to be buying one for their own reasons. If a spy agency has one, we're not going to know about it. They're really good at keeping secrets. They might say, oh, we're working on it, but it'll be 10 years. And there'll be a lot of speculation. We're not going to know. And so that's one thing that you want to keep up on. You probably don't want to become a cryptographer. Some of you might, by the way. I am not discouraging you if you want to become a cryptographer. It's a fascinating field. Lots of you probably have degrees in math, and it's a lot of math. It's well above my head of math, but some of you could do that just fine. So I'm not saying don't become a cryptographer, but you're all network operators already. You've got something to do. You may not want to become a cryptographer. But that would be a way for you to be keeping up with PQC. If not, which I wouldn't do if I were you, quite frankly, like I say, the math is interesting, but it's pretty hairy. Stay in touch with your vendor. And when I say stay in touch, start talking to them now. What are their plans for putting PQC algorithms in the stuff you have today, much less the stuff you're going to be buying? So that is basically what I have as a presentation. I'd really like to hear, and this says questions and comments. I'm actually happy with either. Comments are just fine because comments actually help everyone else in the room. As you're listening to each other's questions and comments, do keep in mind some of this is architectural. What does the protocol do? When will we be safe? When will a cryptographically relevant quantum computer happen? But some of this is operational. And again, you're all network operators. You're used to this thing is available to me, but I can't just shut down my router for 10 minutes to put this update. You'll have to like figure this out. You have to figure out when your peers are doing it as well. So I'm open to this. I'm out here in California, so I can't lead the questions and comments. I'm assuming someone in the room will do that for me.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. A round of applause for Paul.
Thank you.
I'm sure in the room, some of us will trying to become cryptographer, and we can create a working group for that. So let's go for question and answer.
Bless your math teachers if you're doing that.
You can line up here or there. I see Paul. Yes, Paul, please proceed. But, no, the mic is not working, but please introduce yourself.
Hi, to introduce myself, let me just say you've got a great name. Paul Huell. I'm wanting this sort of architectural question, and precise, but particularly because you pointed out the RPKI system is going to be one of the threshold points. On a very basic level, when one or two agencies have possession of a cryptographically relevant computer, they'll be able to break the RPKI system if they decide to do so. But architecturally, they can pretty much break things already. Nothing breaks things quicker than a B2 or a Smith & Wesson. So I'm just sort of wondering whether or not, taking sort of the position that when a particular system cannot be relied upon because a particularly nefarious empowered actor is able to break it is always the way to look at it. I mean, basically pretty good privacy has often been a good norm with email because, perfect authentication of an email user matters very little when people are, logging in and using Gmail and Outlook. I'm just sort of wondering where you sort of see the prioritizing, especially when we're dealing with entities that make a habit of trying to break things for their own purposes.
Oh. Yeah.
Excellent question. And so by breaking for RPKI, I'm sorry, I'm getting an echo here, but okay, great. By breaking RPKI, what I mean is not that RPKI stops working, but it's not completely trustable anymore because one of these actors can pretend to be someone important in the RPKI system, and you won't know. Now, is that going to break RPKI? No. Is it going to erode trust? Maybe. But if that happens after the whole RPKI has gone to post-quantum cryptography, it's no problem. They can't break the new algorithms. So part of this will depend on how many people have not updated their parts of the RPKI to use post-quantum. It's a trust thing. Yes. Yeah, sorry, okay. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I see Professor Nikweno. Daniel, David, are you on the mic too? Okay, so Prof. and then David.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have learned that there are two problems I face. One of them is keeping things secret and then signatures. And you want me to focus on network operations, but I have friends who also do crypto, not cryptography, but cryptocurrency. So I want to ask my question in that context regarding harvesting our traffic now and then later on discovering my signatures and then losing my little coins in my wallet. But my question is as to get an understanding of what is making us sure that our ML-based, I guess, model lattice-based algorithms, which we are referring to as, post-quantum, cryptographic algorithms, feel more trusted than those that can be factored, maybe by way of Shaw or something like that, like our RSA, DSA, and so on. So I want you to give me a feeling for what makes me feel that a lattice-based algorithm is much stronger than factoring primes or something. If you can share some light, thank you.
Oh, you got the question?
I can. And yeah, absolutely. Nee, you always ask the tough questions. I appreciate you doing that. I did not go into that in this discussion, but a cryptographically relevant computer uses a certain kind of algorithm to break things. And that algorithm takes advantage of how our current algorithms actually inherently protect the secret key. A post-quantum cryptographic algorithm doesn't do it that way. It does it a different way. So a cryptographically relevant computer, it's not that, oh, it'll be harder for it to break post-quantum cryptography. It cannot do it at all. Think of it this way. If you have an agricultural system, and for you, what that means is it distributes water. All it does is water your fields. And you're not doing anything with any fertilizer, for example. And someone comes in and says, here, this is fertilizer. You need to put fertilizer on your field. You cannot put that in your watering system. You have to distribute it a different way. It's a different architectural mechanism. That's why we are sure that these post-quantum algorithms will not be affected by quantum computers. They do things in a different way that a quantum computer just isn't built for at all. That's a little bit of hand waving. There are books that can, go into the math in more detail. And as we've said, some of you want to be cryptographers. I am fully confident in this, not that these post-quantum algorithms are harder to break. They are designed to not be at all related to quantum computers. So that's why everybody is trusting them.
Yeah, but before David, so Paul, allow me to build on what Professor Nee just said. I think this concern is also part of why some people are going for hybrid system. We say, we don't know, we don't have fully confident of this yet, so let's not completely move, then we go for a kind of hybrid system. Can you elaborate also on that, please?
Oh, God. Okay, so you get to ask me hard questions as well. Thank you. You go to a restaurant, you know that you want to have chicken, but you're not completely sure because you had chicken for lunch and it's dinner time, and maybe I want to have, I think I want chicken, but maybe I want the lamb as well. So what do? Do you order the chicken? Do you order the lamb? Or do you order the dish that has both of them in it? Because then you're really more sure. I can't answer these things for you. I can't make you more sure of any of these things. And if you look at the debates right now about hybrid, which you are seeing, and thank you for referring to them, you can see, oh, this hybrid system would work. This dish with both lamb and chicken in it, that's a perfectly reasonable dish. How can you decide if you trust it or not? You don't know. Halfway through the meal, you can go oh, why did I get this hybrid meal? I really wanted just chicken. All of these things are based on personal preferences, and important people will tell you which things are important. And then halfway through, you're going to go oh, that was too complicated. I really just wanted the simple dish. I know that didn't answer completely, but I hope you understand.
No, it does. It does.
Listening to experts like me is not going to help you.
David, and then Islam. And maybe from David, we'll take the lady before Islam, please.
Okay. Okay. My name is David. Thanks.
David from where?
Afrinic.
Okay.
Hi, Paul. Thank you for a very lovely presentation. My question was actually bordering more or less on what Alain and Professor Nee were talking about. With regards to signature key sizes and all that, I think for network operators, the important thing will be in transitioning the cost factor of it. So I think you've already touched a bit on that. On the transitioning mechanism, can you please just touch a little bit on what the recent developments are? Because I've read a bit about that, the Merkle tree certificates and all that. Yeah, thank you.
So, thank you. It's a good question. I talked about the easiest answers. There are some answers that are not as easy, and you just mentioned Merkle trees, for example, or just anything that is hash-based. There are post-quantum cryptography, there are many styles of solution. And the ones that I gave are the ones that people have picked first, but they aren't necessarily the ones that you're going to want. So, for example, a hash-based signature scheme is actually more easy to prove that it is secure. We've known about these in Merkle trees. Oh my gosh, it's been more than 30 years now. Sorry, you may not see the gray hair, but I'm getting old as fast as everyone else in the room. We've known that these are perfectly secure. However, what they do, they are different in the sense that the signatures that they generate are just gigantic. 20,000 bytes, 25,000 bytes, like something that just is so different. Do we want to risk putting those in place in our current systems when we don't know? Like right now, I am suggesting when you go to post-quantum algorithms like MLChem, MLDSA, these keys and signatures are this much larger. So you have to think, oh, is that going to be a problem? If I say go to this much larger, where my arms are literally not long enough to say that, will it work? Not sure. And quite frankly, I don't feel that there are enough people in the operational community testing those things. So your question is a good one, which is, gee, we have these other options. Why is Paul not talking about them? And the answer is, I'm talking about the ones that we've even tested so far, and we know that they won't break. Or in the case of certificates, like for TLS, they won't break so much, but we know that they'll break TLS a bit. Again, if you're on a flaky link.
Thank Paul. So please,
Yeah.
and then.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul, for such a wonderful presentation. My name is Lexa. I'm a network and infrastructure engineer from Malawi Research and Education Network. So my question is about quantum computing and its implications for internet security. So at the moment, many African network operators, ISPs and institutions are still consolidating basic security practices like RIPK, DNSSEC. So is there a roadmap specific for Africa to transition to post-quantum cryptography? And if there is, who is reading it? My second question is about if there are any practical tools or toolkits, implementation guides or training programs, ideally accessible to African operators without large security teams that you can point to us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But Paul, before you, I think maybe I'll let you go for the second questions. But the first questions, I think we have to deal with that among ourselves. I don't think Paul will have an answer of his African strategy or African plan. We will have to work on that Okay, maybe Paul, we can send the strategy to Paul to comment on it. But so, Paul, please deal with the second questions, and
Let me deal with the first question because I think it actually is no, because it's a very good question. You are a region. You are a region with your own goals, your own understanding of your own operational issues. Do you want outsiders like me or whoever telling you, here is how, here is your roadmap? And I think the answer is no. I think that there is enough information out there in general for you to make your own roadmap. You might copy other people's roadmaps and such like that. But I assure you, operators in other regions don't understand operations in Africa. They don't understand, for example, how much radio versus fiber you have. They have some ratio themselves. They have a certain number. So any roadmap that anyone imposes on you will be based on what they think for themselves. And they're not Africans. So no, but there are, and your second part of your question was excellent. Are there toolkits? What you really want is a toolkit to make a roadmap and have that roadmap be, in fact, correct for Africa. And those toolkits are coming. We're starting to see ones from various organizations. The IETF has been talking about things. Certainly, you can lean on ISOC and such like that. Some of the cryptographic organizations, those aren't there now, but they are coming, and they will, in fact, help inform you about what roadmaps you want. But part of it really will be you saying, thank you for all this information. Here's our infrastructure. We are network operators who understand how our infrastructure is unique. And quite frankly, how our politics are unique. Look at the number of countries in Africa relative to the number of countries in North America. All of those bilaterals and such, that affects how quickly you're going to implement changes to something like our PKI, for example. So you will lean on, such as the previous speaker from Afrinic, sorry. You will be better off if you're making your own roadmaps and simply asking outsiders, how do we make these roadmaps? How do we take the basic information and apply it the way we know as network operators?
You have a follow-on? No. Okay, thank you. Then Ghislain, and we'll wrap up.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. My name is Ghislain. I am from the Internet Society. I have the two sub-questions from on the size of the key. You said the keys are relatively quite large. I have a question about the cost, the energy cost or the budget cost on that. From a network perspective, are we looking at equipment that will be consuming more power? I'm thinking of remote areas where we have, limited amount of power. So that would be my first question. The second question is about the failure. You mentioned the size being long, we may experience failures. So in the context of RPKI, are we looking at failures in a transitional period, or are we looking at failures from a longer perspective, especially when we go into a kind of real-time, kind of internet-based lifestyle? So those are my two questions. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. The energy costs, I don't think are going to be that significant for network operators in the center. But your question about out at the edge is very, very relevant. So anything that's battery powered is going to be much more negatively affected than something that's just plugged into the wall. Something that's plugged into the wall, you are used to bashing packets through these things all the time. But anything that's battery connected, when you say just in order to start up communication, it's going to take a lot more bytes. That's going to be a big impact. And some people are doing these measurements already. There's some really interesting research in this coming from I'm sorry, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, so my memory is not as good. A research agency in the Netherlands that's funded by the folks from the .nl CCTLD have started looking at energy costs specifically for post-quantum cryptography. They're also looking at this failure rate question, which is when it takes longer to set up a connection, a little glitch during that time will then cause the connection to fail. You'll have to retry and such like that. So yes, you'll see some of that. I don't think the research has been that good so far, but you will see research on that. I would love to see more of the African academics working on this kind of thing, again, because you folks are more familiar with your own infrastructure better. And there will be more coordination on that. Look to the IRTF, the research side of the IETF, for some of these papers.
One last questions for you.
Yeah.
So please.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for the presentation. My name is Ade from Nigeria. You talked about bite size, and in my head, I'm trying to wrap my head around, wouldn't that have an impact on bandwidth requirement once we start installing these devices, for example? In Africa, bandwidth is still quite a challenge, right? What happens if we have series of retransmission because of quality of service? Just trying to wrap my head around it.
Thank you for wrapping your head around it. Please wrap your head around it with other people there. And again, as I said for the last speaker, please publish results that you get for this, because again, these are regional things. And so for example, one thing that, we think of Europe as a region, but in fact, parts of Europe are much more radio based than other parts of Europe. Radio is always more prone to these kinds of problems, especially retransmission. We at least know more about the key sizes. We can start modeling some of this today for what will the transactions look like. And again, we're seeing this already. If you're using a Chrome browser and you're talking to Google as a web server, you are already using some of this post-quantum things. So some of that is measurable, and lean on Google in Africa to give you numbers. I would say exactly the same thing if I were speaking to a bunch of South Americans right now, but I would also say the same thing to speaking to a bunch of Asians. Again, you folks as network operators are very familiar with, it's not all fiber. We have all of these things. Please do measurements. Please publish what you can. And if you're not able to do measurements, please ask your academics to start looking at this. The research is not hard to do, but it hasn't been done in a way that I think is useful to network operators yet. So I'm really hoping that my talk today, anything that you folks take away from that, might cause more good research to be done and come back to you, the network operators.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. It's time for us to wrap up. But just allow me, I noticed that in the presentations, you kind of avoid DNSSEC, and we know that...
Great, you're not going to let me go to bed without this, are you? Okay.
And currently we are working on moving from RSA to ECDSA. Okay, I think this can be a separate conversation we will have. So once again, thank you, Paul. And let's have...